Okay, so we've had a lot of people asking the question about errorless learning. What does it mean? And how do we maybe apply it to a lot of things, but specifically sometimes detection? So I'll let you kind of cover what people mean by errorless learning, or we can attempt that because we know there's lots of definitions for people,
Sure.
but and then go into how or why it would work and things like that.
Sure. So there's a concept in dog training and teaching and learning in general called errorless learning. And in this, what is ultimately happening, you're setting up circumstances so that the dog can't be wrong. So you can reinforce the behavior you want in a teaching phase, and the dog can learn what's expected, and you've put guardrails on to some degree so that the dog can't do anything other than what you want. And there's a variety of ways in which people do that, whether you manage the environment or whether you work on specific simple behaviors in chains and don't allow the dog to flounder around and make a lot of mistakes while learning. Right? Like anything, that concept can be taken to a variety of different degrees, right? So someone could start out and say they want their dog's entire career to be full of errorless learning versus I want to set up a circumstance with a new behavior in which the dog has limited options so that they're much more likely to be successful, gain confidence from being successful, etc. So that's ultimately what errorless learning looks like. And then there's a lot of debate about how much of this should be incorporated into your training process as you go forward. And from my perspective, we can talk about it specifically related to detection, but from my perspective, it's something that every good, thoughtful dog trainer tries to do in the beginning. I'm trying to teach a new behavior. I don't want my dog to flounder around in the dark while they try to figure out what this is and make lots of mistakes. And so I want to set up circumstances so that they're likely to do the thing that I want, so that I can reinforce it. And once the dog starts to have a reinforcement history with that behavior, some people will stay in that lane. And I prefer, at that point, to start giving the dog some possibility to make errors to kind of define the edges of the behavior, as it were, right? And one of the things about errorless learning that's potentially problematic is if you stay with it too long, a couple of things can happen. One, I don't think any behavior is fully known until you've come at the behavior from a variety of angles. And sometimes you learn what something is in a real way by learning what it's not. And so you've set up a situation in which the animal can learn what you want. That's been reinforced, so there's some commitment to that behavior. And then you deliberately allow some mistakes that won't get reinforced that actually strengthen the one before. The other thing is I want to factor this in at the same time that I'm trying to build some resilience in my dog. And one of the things that's really important is that my dog be able to fail and try again.
Correct.
Any creature that's learning, you want to keep them in the game. And we're always playing a balance. If things are too easy, the dog never comes up against adversity in any way, the dog never makes mistakes, then later when they do, the behaviors can be less resilient and less robust. Right? As opposed to a dog that's learned to try some things, and when something doesn't work, try something else. And so how do I find the happy middle ground between these things where my dog gets lots of success in the beginning, I don't leave them out there unmoored making lots of mistakes and getting frustrated and giving up on the behavior or having lots of bad experiences, while gaining the resilience that comes from trying and failing and trying again. And I think that's the waters we're trying to navigate here.
Yeah, and I would say in detection, we have to have that compare contrast kind of thing. As the dogs are learning odor, we have to give them things that are not the odor so that way they can learn this is the odor. And that requires the dog in many cases to, as they're learning, they're going to try things and go, well, is this it too? And you just, most cases, you're going to ignore that. It's broken down just like in most cases where people utilize errorless learning, it's broken down to a very small aspect. So it's just one item is positive, one item is negative, and when there's no reinforcement to the item that has no odor or the odor is not relevant, then this one pays them. And then you increase that. So errorless learning and detection isn't something that's going to be practical in the sense of I can never give them a wrong, like there's no wrong answer ever. There's just going to be, because we have to have compare contrast. Now, I am sure there are people that'll go, well, I'll come up with a way to do it that way. The rubber meets the road in the real world when we see, does this work or not? And like you said, how does the dog handle that when the human doesn't know the answers anymore? We can hope there's great stimulus control. We've heard comments like, well, if they have good stimulus control, then they won't alert to anything else ever.
Mhm.
We've done, and I've seen lots of testing that way, and that's not always the case. It's when we remove the human out of this whole thing is where we see a lot of the struggles, where the dog has to try and navigate, this doesn't work, and this does work. And as soon as they do, like you said, they go through that experience, then they're more resilient. Then I think the stimulus control becomes even stronger because of that aspect.
I think also there's something that's really important is this embedded in any dog training activity is the dog's does 100% success breed resilience, breed perseverance, right? So if a dog does something and we set it up to be easy for them so that they can succeed, right, every time, and their whole life experience is continued success, and then they run up against failure, they run up against difficulty, they run up against hardship, they are in situations where they can't succeed, right? And a good search dog is going to have to search persistently in a wide variety of environments, and they're going to fail sometimes. They're going to run up against, but routinely you search and they don't find things, right? And it's not always practical that you go into that environment and set them up for success every single time. So how does my dog respond to that? And does continued success breed resilience, or does success in the beginning breed a commitment to the activity, and then how much adversity the dog has to handle on the way is what builds resilience? It's the same in humans, right? If you never had to fight through anything and you never lost, then how would you handle losing in adulthood? Probably not well, right? And so it's the idea of purely errorless learning through the life of the dog is sort of a unicorn, right? It's just something that we can't, one, practicality doesn't allow us to set that up, and two, it's likely not the best thing for the dog's overall reaction to finish training problems, right?
And anything scientifically is always looked at, how does it perform identifying the positive, and how does it perform identifying when there's negative, to include also any stimulus whatsoever.
Right.
And that is one of the things that you can't go through that without some type of trial and error to get there. So I hope everybody that answers your question a little bit and gives you some other insight when it comes to errorless learning and what our thoughts and opinions are on that. And remember, that's all it really is we're giving you our feedback. We hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one.